Chef Mark here, and today I'm very excited to be making two really simple but really delicious foods when done well. And those are going to be biscuits, which we're going to be enjoying with some apple butter as well. So the very first thing we're going to be working on is the apple butter. That's going to be the most time-consuming project we have here. That's going to take about an hour to cook, so let's jump right into that. I've got 3 pounds of Fuji apples in front of me here. You can substitute most species of apples. The only thing I've read and tasted that I wouldn't quite recommend for an apple butter is Granny Smith apples. I think that's going to be especially sour and tart. Just doesn't make for as good a finished product. Now, I'm going to get all of these peeled. We don't need the peels on any of these. With apple butter, we're trying to get a very nice, smooth, sort of jammy applesauce consistency that the skin just doesn't allow for. It becomes much too pulpy and gritty. It's been 3 long years of peeling, and now I'm ready to finally get my apples cut up. I'm going to get these cut around the core and slice them really thin just to make sure these cook as quickly as I possibly can get them to. Now, bearing in mind again, this is something that's going to take an hour on the stove cooking. I said before that I'm slicing these thin just to expedite the cooking process, make things go by a little quicker. And this is something that's going to be true of anything you cut, anything that's going to be cooked. The smaller it is, the less time it's going to take to cook. More mass equals more time to break down. Alright, at long last we've got all of our apples into the stock pot. I'm going to get this turned on to medium heat. And into the pot with my apples, I'm going to add some granulated white sugar and brown sugar. I have half a cup each in this bowl here. Let's go all into these. And I've got a little cinnamon and nutmeg here. There's a tablespoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of nutmeg. Get some extra flavor for our apple butter. Next, I'm going to add the zest of half of this orange and the juice of all of it. Now, this is something completely optional. You don't have to do this by any means. I like the way orange and cinnamon pair as flavors, and the citrus from the juice is going to add a nice little layer of flavor, a little subtlety for us. I'm only using half the zest of this orange because the zest is the potent part of the orange. This is where all the essential oils, all the orange flavor is going to be. Now, I don't want this to taste just like orange. I want it to still be apple butter, not apple orange butter. I've got about half my zest in. Right in. Very juicy oranges. Next, I'm going to get a teaspoon of vanilla extract added in. And lastly, half a cup of water. Now, it may seem like we haven't added much in the way of liquid content goes for this apple butter, but the apples themselves have a very high water content, As they continue to soak in the sugars are going to pull moisture out, and as they cook, they're going to, of course, release even more moisture, and then all of this is going to get blended up, so it'll be much smoother, much more liquid than it appears right now. I'm just going to let that be for the time being. Again, this is going to simmer on the stove for about an hour. I'm going to constantly be checking on this to make sure I'm not burning or caramelizing. It's the purpose of medium heat. If you're nervous, you can go lower. Just be wary that you might take a little more time on the simmer. Now, while this is going, we're going to get started on our biscuits. Beautiful, beautiful smells in the kitchen right now. That cinnamon is everywhere in here. And just that faint hint of orange. Just all enough for me to question what it was, maybe if I weren't the one who put it in there. Let's put it away. We'll move on to our biscuits. Starting out right here in my bowl, I've got 2 cups of all-purpose flour. To this, I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt and 2 teaspoons of sugar. The sugar you are more than welcome to omit. It's just something you add for flavor. And now we've got to add some leavening agents. We're using 2 today, both baking soda and baking powder. And before we move any further, let's talk about these 2 leaveners. They are both chemical leaveners. Starting with baking soda, this is known as sodium bicarbonate. It works by interacting with acid, whether that be buttermilk like we're using today, vinegar, yogurt, any other acidic ingredient is going to react with and generate carbon dioxide gas. You've probably seen this in volcano experiments where you add vinegar to baking soda and watch it all fizz up and bubble over the edges of your container. Same principle here, and that's what's going to give rise to our biscuits. Now I've also got baking powder in the mix, which is actually the exact same thing as baking soda. This, however, has had some sort of acid ingredient already added to it so that there's a balance and immediate reaction. All it needs is liquid, while this needs both acid and liquid. So of my baking soda, I'm going to be adding a 1/4 teaspoon. And whenever I work with baking soda specifically, I like to pass it through a strainer or a mesh sieve, just to make sure I don't have any lumps of baking soda in my biscuit. I once, while working at Milkwood Restaurant in downtown Louisville, had made biscuits for our fried chicken dish, and when they came out of the oven, the sous chef went to taste them. He got a mouthful of baking soda, and I had to scrap all the biscuits, at least 30 biscuits I had just made, and start over from scratch. So save yourself the trouble, sift it, don't be sorry. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of my baking powder. Baking powder I'm not worried about, it doesn't clump with the same ease as baking soda. Never had issues with it that way. Now it seems like there's been a huge difference in amounts of leaveners I've added. The baking soda I added less of because it doesn't need as much, because there's still going to be acid for it to react with, and you only need enough for it to neutralize those acids there. Otherwise you get left this sort of bitter, soapy, you can definitely taste there's baking soda in here biscuit. Lastly, we got some vegetable shortening here. This is going to help shorten any gluten bonds that might develop. I want to make sure I get a nice flaky and even a moister biscuit by adding fat to this. I'm going to get 2 ounces in here, or 4 tablespoons. And this is completely optional. You can make your biscuits just with butter. I just like the addition of shortening, that extra bit of moisture, a little more insurance on the texture. There we go. And before I go adding anything else, I'm going to get my shortening rubbed in here very well. I want this to be a very coarse looking mixture, kind of sandy. Now I had mentioned earlier that the difference between baking soda and baking powder is the presence of an acid ingredient in one, and that presence of acid actually is exactly why we need two different kinds of leaveners in our biscuit. The baking powder, once liquid hits it, becomes active immediately, and the more time it sits, the less potent and active it's going to be when your product actually goes into the oven. So a little baking soda on the back of that is going to help get that extra rise out of your product. This is looking just the way I want it. Nice and crumbly. I can sort of shape it together in my hand like that and break it apart. Now it's time to add the best parts of the biscuit, the butter and buttermilk. So I've got 4 ounces of butter, or 1 stick, that's going to go in here. I want to get this cube. Now I'm using butter straight out of the fridge. You can even give your butter a little freeze time, that's even better. We just want this butter to be as cold as possible the entire time it is in our dough, so that it doesn't completely melt, dissolve into the rest of it, because that is also going to help by creating those layers of flake that we like. Now, I've got a pastry cutter. This isn't necessary. You can do this by hand. I just like having a little tool on hand to do this so that, again, the warmth from my hands isn't interacting with the butter. It's not causing it to melt any faster. I can work a little bit slower, but I still want to be as focused and time wary as I can be. Just this rocking motion, breaking this butter up until I get nice chunks of it, very similarly to when I made the pie crust. Now, if you don't have a pastry cutter on hand, you can use a fork. I just find it's a little more time consuming, and for working with butter, you want to be as quick as you can possibly be when you're trying to keep it cold. So I opt for my hands instead, just to be a little faster. Or if you want, go out. Almost any sort of department store with a home section is going to have these. They're not any kind of expensive. It's $5 to $7. Few large chunks in here, but I'm very much nearing the end. Again, I'm not trying to get butter completely homogenized into the dough, just getting those chunks strewn through it. And now we are ready for our buttermilk. Starting with 1 full cup of buttermilk, also fresh and cold out of the fridge. I hope you're not keeping buttermilk at warm temperature in your home. And while I'm starting at 1 cup, I may end up needing to add more. I just like to have a place to start at and add a little more as I need to, rather than add too much and have too wet a biscuit dough. I'm just going to roughly bring this together by hand until a semblance of a dough starts to form. It's coming together pretty quickly. I'm not trying to overmix at this point. I just want the dough to come together. I'm not looking for a perfectly homogeneous one. That's about all I want to do with it. Get all this excess dough off of my fingers. And I'm going to set this in the fridge to chill for about 10 minutes. Again, just getting that butter cold and a little more solid again before I pull it out and begin the rolling process. Now you can, if you want to at home, go ahead and begin rolling your biscuits out immediately, but I like to err on the side of caution, keep my butter as solid and cold as possible, so I'm going to chill it. Ooh, yes. And you can see now in the pot there's a much more liquid than there was before. I definitely did not add all of that in water or orange juice. So that's all of our melted sugars into the excess moisture pulled from the apples by the sugar and the heat. This is working along beautifully. It's kind of got a nice thick syrupy consistency. Alright, our apple butter has been going for about 45-ish minutes now. I've killed the heat on it. I'm going to get it blended up, and it's going to go right back into the stock pot to continue cooking down until we've got a very nice thick consistency. You can see how well and beautifully our apples have broken down. Very wilted, much more brown, this rich caramel color to them. Very carefully here. Just to be on the safe side, we're going to do this in 2 batches. Lid on secure, and we buzz. We've got a very nice dark applesauce looking mixture. Last of our apple. Buzz 2. Excellent. All right back in the stock pot. Scraping is the name of the game. Get as much out as you can. Every little bit you leave in the blender is a little bit of apple butter you could have been having. There we go. Now it's looking like significantly less now that everything's been cooked down and blended up. We're almost at the finish line. I'm going to get this back on medium heat. I've got a nice thick consistency to my apple butter now. It's perfect spreadable consistency for me, so I'm going to go ahead and kill the heat here. Let that cool down a little before I remove it, add it to anything. In the meantime, get busy on my biscuits. First things first, I'm going to get my work surface floured very well. We've got wet dough and chunks of butter still in it, so it's going to stick much more easily. I want to prevent that as best as I can. Let's get all my dough out into the surface. Get my hands rubbed with flour so I can handle this without having to worry about my dough sticking to me. I'm going to fold my biscuits. This is also going to help contribute to those layers. I'm going to do this about 4 times. 3 and 4. Get all this flour one more time before I roll. As always, I prefer flouring the surface of whatever I'm rolling out. I don't care to flour my rolling pin. I find it utterly ineffective. See, flour just falls right off of it. What's that going to prevent sticking? Again, trying to get nice, even biscuits, so I'm rolling from the center out every time. Center, gentle roll forward, and back, and turn, 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 and keep that dough from sticking. So not using any extra force to roll this out, just the weight of my arms and rolling pin as they naturally are. And for biscuits, you want about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch thick dough, depending on how big you want your biscuits to get. But this is good for me right here. Feeling for evenness real quick. There we go. Cut out as much as I can with my ring cutter here. These are also very inexpensive for a set of 3, about $5. Of course, you can also just use a cup or any other cylindrical tool you have lying around the house. Get creative with it. Be resourceful. Get these onto my tray. Bring this dough all together again. Give it another couple folds. Keep those layers. I'll try to get as many biscuits out of this as I can. That might be my last, though. This last guy I'm not going to worry about rolling out. I'm just going to make it conform to the shape of the mold. I'll have one nice thick biscuit. That's thick with 2 C's. Now these look nice and ready to go into the oven, but I am going to chill them one more time just to keep that butter cold. Make sure I get the flakiness that I desire out of my biscuits. And after another 10 minutes, these will go right into the oven, which I've got preheated at 450 degrees. Alright, now we're going to get these brushed with some butter. If you don't have a pastry brush on hand, you can implement a folded paper towel just like so. Works just as well. Make these nice and brown on top when we bake them. straight into our 450-degree oven. These are going to bake for no more than 10 minutes. At the 5-minute mark, I'm going to get these turned around like I always do. Make sure everything bakes evenly. And ideally, we have some gorgeous biscuits coming out in just 10 minutes. Oh yeah. You can see they've already puffed up quite nicely in here. Yeah. Another 5 minutes until they're golden brown and delicious. Alright, my timer just went off. It's been 10 minutes officially now. Let's see how our biscuits are doing. Yes. Beautiful light golden brown color. I think I want these just a little bit darker. And that's just a personal preference there. You can totally take these out as is, let them keep going a bit longer, get more color on them. I just want a little more color. It's been 2 minutes. Biscuits should be just where I want them to be now. Let's get them out. And there we go. You can see along the sides of them those layers that we've created. Everywhere the biscuits start to pull apart, let's pull one apart. See how it looks on the inside. Oh yeah, just flakes open. Such a good biscuit, still plenty moist, very buttery and rich. Now I need this with the apple butter. Alright, here we go. The culmination of like 2 hours of work. The potency of that cinnamon is just right in this apple butter. It's so good. And just appropriately sweet. It's not like any commercial apple butter I've bought where you taste more sugar than anything else. This is the apple itself. The orange is so subtle, just underneath the radar. Probably wouldn't know it was there if I told you. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Get down in that comment section. Let us know anything you want to see in the future, and we will see you next time.